why should we keep borders? Why should we keep frontiers in Africa if we are all Africans? So this is, of course, the mission, the noble mission of SASASNet. So now we're not taking questions, sorry, we are a bit short of time now. We have our friend from Kenya, Architect Wambua, who is going to present, of course, the first session that was supposed to be held in the morning, but he had to present yesterday's session. So now let us give him the floor for the next hour or so that he can present for today's presentation.
In setting up SASASNet, I think it is going to be very helpful, and especially for that case study of the harmonization of occupational standards between the three countries. I wish that presentation can be shared as a case study in our conference, because we are really struggling even as Kenya in adopting even occupational standards from other countries to inform labor mobility. So thank you very much. So yeah, this is for today. Yeah, now this is the real today. Thank you very much. So we will, again, 5 steps for me, do good, or 5 steps outline. Yeah, so we will, yeah, so we are basically, as you saw, RPL process and methodology is a broader topic, but the session is about steps in the RPL process. So I will delve more on the steps in the process, not more methodologies. I think methodologies we'll do later. So just a highlight of the process, a bit of it, and a few steps maybe. And so again, yeah, RPL is a process. One of the critical component of that process is assessment, like I said. And I know because you are experts in education, vocational training, and quality assurance, assessment can be summative or even formative. But of course, so it is at the center of the process. But it is not the only other thing. It's not the only thing. I think that's a statement. So there's a lot of discovery, especially from, I think the second bullet is about now. When we talk about the RPL process, it's important to ask ourselves, RPL process with respect to who? Because it's a process where, from where we sit, there's a lot of engagement of actors. And for this case, including, or what we use, stakeholders. But for this case, let's use the example of the candidate. In Kenya, we had a bit of a challenge. Even now, we have special training institutions like TVET institutions or TVET trainers, service providers. They are still stuck with students and learners. So when you talk about RPL process as a training undertaking, then it becomes a bit. But if you talk about RPL assessment or RPL process is majorly focusing on assessment, then you also start to see who is in that process and all that. So the second point is to say that so there's a lot of discovery, self-discovery. There's a lot of description of what you're discovering, for example. There's a lot of documentation of discovered experiences, or whatever experiences you have, and then you package them into competencies, and that is especially as a candidate or as a claimant. In Kenya, like I said, we have been having terms, we are still agreeing, people saying, it is recognition of prior learning, so are you a learner? Yeah, we are calling it recognition of prior learning, so are you a learner? So you have come through a learning journey, so are you still a learner? Or have you stopped learning? Now, you become a candidate for assessment. Or are you directly a candidate already for assessment? Yeah, and then others we are using, especially the Tibet Authority, as they are introduced. Now they even don't call you a candidate, not even a student or a learner. They call you a claimant, a very funny term, a very funny term. Because they are saying, as far as they are concerned, you're just making a claim. And sometimes a very wild, stupid claim. You're just making a very wild, unfounded claim that you're an engineer. So they say, or an architect. Sorry. Like, or you're a doctor. Actually, Kenya is very, they say you actually nearly, we are almost saying you're a quack. Yeah. we don't know. I mean, you're just making a claim. Yeah, so we can give you so you can give you a benefit of that, but we are not sure whether you are a real candidate, because a candidate must be prepared. What is the description of a candidate? Those are the issues. So what is the process of preparing a candidate for an assessment? How do you prepare? They say we train. You become a student, you go through, and then you finish the course. That is now syllabus and the curriculum. So those are the conversations from very important stakeholders that are key in the RPL process. And then the others were saying, well, so that's why we were saying we have now seen some documents introducing the word claimant, and then they are confident saying, as far as those are the quality assurance people. The Tibet Authority is in charge of quality assurance in the Tibet sector. So they say, as far as we are concerned, you're just a claimant. We don't know you. You've never been through our system. You've never been through our process. So how you come in, we first brand you a claimant. Then at an appropriate time, we will see whether you become even an applicant. Yeah, so those are the issues that we pose. Of course, the point here is that all that process of recognition will end up possibly with the outcome must be, after an assessment, the outcome must be certification. I think that is the point. But the other point in this process is there's a lot of engagement that is needed in sharing information, exchanging information, listening from the claimant, and make sense out of what he claims. Because most of the time it doesn't make sense to you. It may not make sense. Of course it makes sense to the claimant, but it may not make sense to everybody. And then if you are there as a facilitator, an RPL facilitator or a practitioner to guide, and you already have prejudice as to whether this fellow is really, he knows what he's talking about, you can imagine how that process will end. Your guess is good as mine. How do you guide somebody that you even do not understand or you do not believe he should even be in the process? You may not be objective, or you may not be competent enough to guide even when you wish. Yeah, because that's a and Dr. Kailash, we were just sharing during tea break, one of my, let me say mentor, not trainer, but one of the persons that I have interacted with, and I've gained a lot from him is Professor Patrick Warkwe, who is a French specialist in RPL, especially from the French system of RPL. and I'm pleased to know. So when you talk about the process and the steps, those two. So we have a process and there are steps, all right? Sometimes we have divergence because it has to be clear how many steps. I mean, you must define. If you have a process, let's agree from here to which point. So I was coming to Abuja. So it's a journey. So I came through Togo. So I used about three flights or so. But I could have also come direct. So one-step process or two-step process or three. So these are examples of, and this, I have picked this from the AACQF, the African Continental Qualification Framework, which is a project even Dr. Kailash was involved. So let me say that, and this is what's very important, like it was said by Engineer Suleiman, that Yusuf, that sometimes a country must agree at a national level so that you adopt a consensus position on the RPL process and even the steps, but also you benchmark with other cases. So if you look at the left, there seems to be 6 steps. There are 4 steps. But in the right, there are 3. So that is about South African SADC, the region, the SADC region, which is influenced largely by South Africa as a country. In the middle is European. I think the European Training Foundation also is involved in this and helping Africa as a continent. Kenya, we have adopted the right one. We have adopted the ILO. So the point for me here was, actually the ILO, there are 3. I get fascinated about the ILO one because there are 3 steps, but each step has got 2 words. You see, in ILO they talk about awareness and publicity. So there is always A, so they don't break it into. If you look at the others, like the European, you say identification, documentation, assessment, certification. Very straightforward. So if you say it is identification, then we break down identification. Yeah. So even the other one, the SADC one, you can see. Yeah. But the ILO is what fascinates me and us because we have adopted this as a guide for Kenya. We talk about publicity and awareness, counseling and facilitation, then assessment and certification. They go 2 in 1 in each step of the process. Yeah, so this is you share this. This is the ILO. So it's a process. So there is a flow of the process. The steps. So this is what they call the flow chart. The entire process is here in this flow chart. Shows the process and the steps. And I'm sure you have interacted with this one. So in this ILO, it talks about the first step, awareness and the publicity or information, then counseling and facilitation. But then, and I have not amended anything. You see in the middle, there are some arrows going down in yellow. So it's like it's attempting to show the steps or the sub-steps of the main steps, right? So you can, and then they describe, and then that's the first step, what is going to happen, the second major step, what is going to happen, and there could be sub-steps. Then in between they say if you are not suitable, if you are suitable. And of course, I was just sharing with Dr. Kailash, when this is being used in Kenya, most of the time, it is assumed it is a very straightforward process. Very straightforward. I mean, people wonder what is rocket science, what's the big deal? But then you realize that if you are a practitioner, assessor, or a quality assurer, so you realize there are other smaller steps that especially if you interact with the candidate, there are other steps the candidate goes through, and they don't seem to be properly documented. If you listen to their experiences, you can easily find where they got stuck, where they got a challenge, and there were more details of that step that are not captured in there. So if a practitioner, and if Kenya is, or I mean, if a country is implementing, and the details are not explicit and they are not clarified, people tend to just tick the box. They use it as a guideline. They say, okay, did the candidates go through counseling? Hey, we had a meeting and there's a record, they attended, and we have a record. So it becomes very simplistic, and yet then you leave out details the candidate could not provide because you just want to push them fast through the process. So the challenge is to funnel candidates through a process so that you find them the other end. Yeah, and the challenge is that for us in Kenya, if that process is pushed quickly, the outcome is not very, there are complaints. So one, the candidates feel that was a fake process because their expectation was not met. The assessors, the quality assuring, qualifications awarding institutions feel that the candidate did not qualify, and therefore, yeah, so they become issues now. People start protecting their, because probably they have not agreed what are the steps, how long should one step take, for example. And I will say why it is important, because I know in education training we talk about nautical hours, a number of hours that a level or a unit of competence should be taught. And you just say, no, it is 2,300. Yeah, so, because that is in the curriculum. But the other side is that we are realizing in Kenya that, so we are now pushing, saying it's not about hours, it's about the volume of learning. I mean, a candidate can take 2 years to learn the same volume that another candidate can take 1 month to learn. It's completely okay. So you don't count hours. I can go, come, re-entry, flexibility. So those are the things. Because how I learned, again, where I learned, yeah. So those are the issues. But this is what is interesting because you will see it later. Now, this is what was adopted by the African Continental Qualification Framework Project. One of my good friends was an expert there, and a few others. You will see this one in the handbook, the African Continental Qualification Framework Handbook. You'll find this. It's a bit, you can't see it well. You see the variation between this and the ILO one. What is interesting is that so here there are no numbers. There is no step 1, 2, 3. They're just tables. The other one we have 1, 2, 3. So you can see the steps are 3. Here, then this one has introduced after awareness and publicity. They have actually before awareness, they have introduced something. If you read this one, they call pre-application. The first one is pre-application. They have introduced a word they are calling pre-application. They have introduced another word called pre-screening. Yes, pre-screening. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know whether, but I share. When you see from your phone or from your laptop, you can use. But so there are 2 steps that have been introduced that did not look like they were there by the CQF. And it was out of experiences that, for example, the role of actors in the process, RPL process, and at what stage, in fact, I will go to the next one. Do we talk about steps, process steps, and phases? Now I've brought another word, a phase. Yeah. These are also words, yeah. So we began with RPL process and steps. But now we've also brought another phase. At what phase, at what stage? Maybe I could use the word stage. So if you look at the African Union, African Continental Qualification Framework Handbook for RPL practitioners, you see they have started talking about phases within steps, right? So it's just for us to start now appreciating the terminologies. What do we adopt as a Nigerian process? We agreed on the number of steps. We even agree that within the step there are phases, and we define these phases. And these are the stuff and then what happens at each stage. So that I don't tire you, because I gave myself a time. It's just for us to start to reflect and to think, so that we have material to discuss in our group, because now I hear there's already direction in terms of creating and coordinating or a steering committee. What is it to look into? So let's do some steps in detail. I'll have adopted like the SQF. I have adopted the SQF, which are 6 steps, but I will only do 3, so that the rest we can do. So I have suggested that it has 6 steps. So I want us to just look at 3 steps, the first 3 steps. The rest we can, not even the 3. We can try the first 3 in detail to see what is in those steps of the process. So step number 1 is initial information and guidance. That's how it is put. ILO talks about awareness and publicity. But ILO, the first step is awareness and publicity. The SQF talk about initial information and guidance. But I've also told you, in Kenya, when we adopted the SQF, I also amended the ILO one. You will look at this to be slightly different, even the words. There are some steps that they have avoided because they were controversial, because there were actions or things to be done in that step. If you look at this one, the ILO, especially around this area, there are some things around this. So people concentrate on this a lot, because that is what is being done by service providers, RPL service providers. But this red one, this side, is very heavy on the candidate. Because you see, at a certain step, they say not suitable. They say skills gap training or gap training. They say not suitable, skills gap training. Not suitable, skills gap training. Not suitable. So, but if they are suitable, the yellow one, you proceed straight up to the point when you are tested and certified. But if you are not suitable at any stage, you exit. Then when you exit, you go for skills gap training, so that you meet the expectation and you are certified. But if you finish all these steps here, this flowchart suggests that you wait until you finish everything and you appeal. So you can't appeal in between. That is what this process and the steps speaks about. But if you come to the next one, slightly different. This is what has been adopted by African Continental Qualification Framework, which is part of us. Here you don't see anything about not suitable. There is nothing like suitability or eligibility, for example. We will talk about eligibility and suitability. It is just assumed, but it has brought appeal before the skills gap training. So you can appeal anywhere. If you look at this flowchart, you will see the difference. So you need to agree at what point does a candidate appeal if they feel prejudiced in the process. And this one suggests that the candidate can appeal at any stage. And then skills gap training can also happen Yeah. But this is what I picked was very interesting. And then what this also talks about, and you'll see it, when there is a skills gap identified, you can take people for training, and training that is formal training, they go to a college or school, or they may also not go to anybody's training, they can just go and work. They continue gaining experience on the job. And when they feel competent, they can come back and sit for assessment. So that for me, that was very interesting. And so let me move to so I was here saying the initial step here, the word initial is very important, because if this is the first step, the objective is just, and now we have started using the word step or phase. So you'll agree whether it be a phase one, the first phase of the process, or the first step of the process. Because a phase can have several steps. But if the step is definite, then it is just what to be done at that step and done. Yeah, but within phase one, you can do 3 steps and you miss one. So those are the semantics and details. But the objective of this first step is not to tell many things, but to tell everything. So you provide information first, clarity. You provide information. You motivate the candidate. You build the trust. This first step is very critical because it is okay. Let's say to the claimant or to the applicant or to the candidate. This one, it is very critical to the individual who aspires to be recognized. So it is your work as now a practitioner on the other side. If you are a facilitator, you're a counselor. Kenya, we are using counselors, for example. We are using RPL counselors. That's the word we are commonly using as one of the practitioners. So the work is to provide very objective information. You motivate, you build trust, so that they understand everything, but in summary. So it's very interesting, and I will show you what they need to understand in this first step. Yeah. That the general, but also the actual. So you say what RPL is in description, but you also tell them what steps they need to go through. They need to be aware and psychologically be ready to go through that step. So this is everything in summary. You have a candidate that has never been properly schooled. So initially, you need to tell them about 15 things. You need to introduce what RPL is to that candidate. You need to tell them the benefits. You need to give them the overview of the process. You need to tell them the roles and responsibilities of people involved, especially them as applicants or candidates or even claimants, and the people they will meet on the road on that process. They will tell you, by the way, you will meet a counselor, you will meet an assessor, you will meet a planner, you will meet a quality assurer. So you tell them who the roles and the people that they are likely to interact with. They may have concerns, they may have fears, they have needs. So you explain and clarify the needs. All right? So there are about 15 things you need to say in summary. And don't go to detail. So the issue is how you balance. You have a candidate that is not a professional, is not an expert. He just claims that they want to be assessed to be a painter. And you have to give them everything in summary without details. Yeah, so that's why the word initial. Please don't go to the details, because it's not you have not started the assessment. You just try to give them. Because I want to close. We have only, I said we will handle 3 steps out of 6. The second step, which I think we should, and I have a lot of quarrel personally with my good teacher, Professor Patrick Pakwe, because of the wordings of this step. For example, in Kenya, we have a lot of quarrel because we don't talk about So from information, you go direct to registration. For us in Kenya, after awareness, what we call awareness and publicity, which is information, people do not register. We don't talk about registration. There's something we call expression of interest. And our expression of interest is not even a registration. It's not even like an application. It's not a formal application for assessment. It's just for somebody to say, I think I am interested. So, but this step, if you look at the wordings, they are very heavy on administrative formal things. So they say, of course, but this is about the reason why we have to interact with this one, because it has already been provided as a guideline in the African Continental Qualification Framework Handbook for RPL practitioners that has been supported by AU. So being members of the African Union, we may need to be. But for us in Kenya, we are members of African Union, but we are not using these words. We have removed, so we have, in fact, for us, we have adopted the other one where there is you even don't say pre-assessment. There's a word, we say pre-screening. So we begin with the mobilization. What we say identification of candidate. For us, we use the word mobilization or identification of candidates. It's very critical for us. Where are these candidates coming from? Because we have seen a situation where the college students who are in school currently enrolled for diploma and certificates and blah, blah, purportedly being assessed and RPL. And being told they are competent. And they are saying they have been assessed under RPL system and therefore they are competent. For us, that is not RPL. Because those are people who just wait for their normal exams when they fall due. And there's a reason why we insist that those candidates that feel that they have been in school and they have been learning in school. And then if they want to go for RPL, then it's a different group. So for us, we tell them you go for CPET. Just go for CPET assessment because there's a clear system and framework. So for us in Kenya, we don't deregister people before they have been identified. And we are very clear who is supposed to identify the candidate or the claimant or even the applicant. For us in Kenya, they are identified by employers and the labor sector. They are not identified by it. Now, if the education is not to identify, they can advertise. Then people can apply. But when they apply, it's also a different ball game. They don't apply to go to school. Because that is the challenge we found ourselves in. People are registering for courses. So what challenge we are finding in TVET institutions when they advertise for RPL assessment, they advertise for full courses. They say, RPL assessment is open for the following: motor vehicle mechanic level 4, building technology technician level 6. That's what they say, which is wrong. Because for us and from our practice, those are courses, those are full courses. So if you want somebody, it's like saying, we are assessing for bachelor's degree, please apply. Because you sit an exam for a bachelor's degree in chemistry, Bachelor of Science degree, Bachelor of Science in chemistry. That's what because you are advertising a full qualification, which somebody should have gone maybe through formal learning and acquire. Then when somebody applies and says, I want to be assessed to be for a bachelor's degree mechanical engineering, Bachelor of Science mechanical engineering. I want to be assessed for Bachelor of Science in mechanical engineering. Then naturally somebody will wonder, that's a 4-year course, a 5-year course. So how on earth do you want to be assessed to become an engineer? So that is a challenge. So the education sectors, because they are challenged, what they know is courses and they have to advertise for people to apply. So they say we cannot leave it open that so we told them, if you want, then advertise for occupations. Say, for full say we are assessing for people to become plumbers. So if you feel you're a good plumber, come. Whatever course you took to become a plumber, we don't care. What we are interested in is we are looking for certifying mechanical engineers. Full stop. So come forward if you're a mechanical engineer. Don't tell us where you went to school, because it's not important to us. What is important is for us to assess you to become what you feel you are, or what you claim to be you are. We are not asking you to come and take a course. So that's the reason why for us in Kenya, while this is guided, there are issues about registration, the wordings. But nevertheless, in fact, Kenya, they even used to say admission numbers, registration numbers. So these are the details that you are likely to find under this step. And you can see it's very formal, it's very administrative, but nevertheless, it is a step in an RPL process. So you need to agree, for example, if this is a step you would adopt in Nigeria, and I mean in your process, and what details and how it will impact RPL system, your RPLs. So the third one, which I want to finish with, because we agreed, is that, and I was very deliberate. I have the word candidate and the one who was added, but in the SQF they were saying application, screening, and eligibility. So they say application, screening, and eligibility. It is me who added the word candidate, because it still needs, you don't need to be vague in the process. If you say there is a process and there are steps, please say who must go through. The moment you say who the person goes through, you will see, or who is supposed to facilitate, then you will see what it means in terms of quality of RPL process. But let me finish, or rather conclude by saying, the reason why I personally, because I said this training, and we agree with Dr. Kailash is also a training for us. This forum is also training for us. For me, it's very reflective. Even the opportunity to come and facilitate, I struggled because I'm reflecting what we are doing in Kenya and what some documents, even including those of the AU, are saying. So I was wondering, when you say application, screening, and eligibility, I'm wondering which one. Do we apply, you get screened, then you become eligible? All right? Let's say you are a candidate, and for me, number one is, when you talk about this step, the step is written, application, screening, and eligibility. Is that step clear? Or there are three steps or there are sub-steps in that step, which is application is a step, or it's an activity under that step. Screening is an activity under that step. Eligibility is an outcome of the step or the process, something like that. So I was wondering, so a candidate applies, they get screened, then a determination is made as to whether they are eligible or not. Then if they are eligible, now they are allowed to begin the process. Because you can't start a process with an eligible candidate or person or player or actor, right? So that's, for me, that was very interesting to know. But I also added, so in Kenya, this is what we do in Kenya. We do number 2. Even before pre-screening, we mobilize. Kenya is something you hear it even in. So what you say, identify the candidate first. We use the word potential. So we don't call you a candidate. We say we identify potential candidates. That's how we say. Because you could be a candidate or not. At some point you become a candidate, but you are a potential. So a potential candidate is a person we first identify. Then once you identify and you make a long list of potential RPL candidates, RPL assessment candidates, you pre-screen them, right? That's how we do it in Kenya, pre-screen. So it is during pre-screening that we determine eligibility, so that we don't waste your time. And then we can guide you. Once we find that you're not eligible, we don't curse you and we don't demean you. Now, that is where information and guidance. So we tell you, by the way, you claimed that you are a good mechanic. In the pre-screening, we determined that a mechanic, from our initial conversation, we feel that you may not be eligible for assessment to become a motor vehicle mechanic, for example. So we guide you what you need to do if you aspire to be assessed to become a competent motor vehicle mechanic. So you determine eligibility before you go far, even without wasting resources of starting to register you. Yeah, but then there is an expression of interest you do when you are identified. So I just shortened. Then, now, once you are eligible is when we allow you to make an application. And this application now is the formal application for assessment for whatever now we have agreed in the preceding. So that is probably why number 3 is very important for all of us. Which terms of process or step between number 1 and 2 will you adopt? This one is already documented. The first one is a guide. The second one it's our own experience. Then the issue of eligibility is becoming very emotive in Kenya, and we are having people being prejudiced because they feel strongly they are eligible, but the other people feel strongly they are not eligible. So there is a fight. So we are wondering eligibility, what eligibility? So for us in Kenya, we say anybody is eligible because you just need to claim, make a very stupid, foolish claim, and you come forward. For us, that is the eligibility. Now, for us, that is eligible for RPL. But at some point, we will determine whether you can be a candidate for an assessment. So we don't lock you too early because we can easily create despondency and the people stop coming forward. But we say, like, yeah, I know Nigeria is also a very religious country. Come as you are. We say, come as you. We don't bother what your sins were. But as we proceed, you will never be the same. So that's just what I wanted to say. And we have a problem. Is people saying you must have minimum eligibility. We say, what is the entry behavior? What is the minimum requirement for RPA candidates? So that's also a conversation we're having in Kenya, because people are saying, and I hear what the people are pushing for, a minimum eligibility or minimum requirement, because they are saying, I mean, if for heaven's sake you want to be assessed, so I want to give you, this is the last but one. Let me give you some golden rules. This one, they are just gold. You know, America is in the golden age. Is it the golden period? Yeah, golden something. So these are golden. Please, in terms of steps, RPL steps, or even the entire process, please run away from this temptation. The urge to mimic the ideal. Be very, in terms of the steps and the entire process, and Engineer Suleiman told us there is no ideal, there is no standard, there is no, I mean, you can choose whatever, but please, there is a tendency for people to box in the process and they say this is the ideal. So be careful not to mimic something that you know is ideal. Yeah, the issue of organizing and coordinating, please, there is a huge urge, because we are coming from the formal education training as facilitators. We know, so there is a huge urge to organize the entire process in sequences. Like I said when I was trying the steps, what about if step 3 begins and not step 1? Is that a process? If we say first and foremost there are 9 steps, and we begin step 3, we organize the disorganization. Yeah? We organize the confusion. So there's a need for that, as I conclude. Be watchful, because there is a huge urge to keep the process well organized, sequentially, please, so that there is no, yeah. And the point is, will be so surprised in Kenya. Although we understand the process and the steps, sometimes we do them parallel. So, yeah, because it's a candidate, so sometimes you don't know. I mean, if you box in the candidate, they run away, they fight, and they are sometimes some of the candidates from where they come, they don't have very good history with education. So they can easily tell you off to go to hell with your system. Yeah. So they say, I remember the math teacher in standard 3. You are now becoming another one like him. So I'm not here to take up that nonsense again. You go to hell. I have made my millions without education, without papers, so you can go. You have papers and you have no money. I have money and I have no papers. Let's move on. Yeah. So those are things that we get. So we try to be very sensitive to the candidates. Some stages or especially the steps, some steps can take a lot of time. But you see, definitely, of course, because you are an expert, you are a practitioner, you know, you balance so that you are not tied up. Of course, the last is what was made by engineer. Please don't mimic Kenya system. It is not gospel truth. So please deal with the Nigerian issues, the Nigerian actors and their issues and their concerns and their interests. Because they will be very useful. The last one is interesting to you. We get obsessed with quality assurance. In Kenya is very interesting. Of course, infuse it, it is part and parcel. But don't get obsessed with it. Yeah, sometimes you over quality assure until you stall the process. So in Kenya, the regulator, the TVET authority, writing circulars and memos and saying we are withdrawing those certificates. Then people are saying, which certificate are you? Say, so they even realize they have no law to even recall a certificate. But they said we have made a stop because we realized there was no quality assurance, and because we realized there were people who claimed they were assessed. They were given the certification of their claim, then they went back now to the labor market, they were employed, some secured employment. Then the feedback came from the employer, say, okay, I needed a supervisor, but the supervisory, I have given this candidate, they came with the papers, they went through RPL, but I have given them the job. I don't see supervisory skills. I have trouble with their team, with their department. Right? They claim they have been supervising work for the last 30 years. And maybe they demonstrated, they provided evidence and you certified them, but now. So now the Tibet authority ran amok. They ran and said, we are giving you a circle. So we had to get a ministerial intervention. And then so the authority was told, we are even going to collapse you and scrap you because you are hindering government agenda. So those are the issues, especially because they get obsessed. Quality assurance people can get very obsessed because they want to keep the process watertight for countries, because it's good to keep your country's brand. Yeah, but again, you stall other actors. Otherwise, thank you very much for that. God bless you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Session for
Yeah.
questions. When a claimant comes, before the registration, after identifying the eligibility, there are disciplinary process. And I believe this disciplinary process will equally involve the activities of the facilitator. And I could equally believe that the facilitator will be paid. While the actual payment for the assessment of the RPL might have happened after the eligibility identification and the registration of the candidate. Is there a payment, for example, for a claimant to go through the screening before the actual application for registration, or the entire payment is going to be made, and possibly when the eligibility is identified that this claimant may not go into this now, maybe you refund the assessment fee and retain the screening fee? How do you actually take charge of this? I'm seeing it as a bit of a change.
Do you have like templates in which we domesticate it all so that we can also point to God. Thank you.
They are huge, but we also have templates. Within each big guide, you find is like a form or something. So they are there. Actually, we did them at the high level, at the KNQ, the qualification level, but guiding everybody involved. So what happens if you are a qualification awarding institution was in one pathway, like it is in Tibet, there is a regulator in Tibet. So you pick and domesticate within yourselves. Yeah, so there are high level guides and tools and templates, but then what you do, you pick one and domesticate within your space, your sector. And that is that. I think it can even be found the guides can be found online, but the templates can also be found because you develop. Yeah, and they are not perfect. Please don't copy. You remember our last meeting? Yeah. Please don't copy and paste. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.